Hey, everybody, welcome to this recap of episode 56 of The Question. This was an episode with Brad, who's with me here. Hey, Brad, what's up?
Hello, thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks for jumping in real quick to sort of just recap. We just finished the episode, it went an hour and 15 minutes solid of lots of deep conversation. So much good information is sort of captured in the FigJam file. So that's linked here in the description. So make sure you go and grab that file. But just so that you know, if you're new to the question, we ask a question on Monday. We analyze the data Wednesday and Thursday, and then we do a deep dive session that week. And so anybody who answers the question gets invited to join us for that deep dive. So it's a free thing to participate in. You just have to be willing to share your own experiences. And so that's what we did this week. Our question this week was around this idea of consistency in diverse product organizations. And Brad, I'd love it if you don't mind, just tell me sort of what's happening in your world that led you to this as a question you wanted to ask about.
Yeah, well, I mean, selfishly, we just released a course on design tokens, which is a big ingredient in helping meet the diverse needs of all of the different things that an organization has to deal with. And we lovingly refer to it as the multi all the things organization. But yeah, like, so we had everybody who answered the question. It was this like really fascinating split of people supporting multiple products, multiple brands, sub-brands, rebrands, different design generations, multiple color modes, different web frameworks, native and non-web stuff, and into white labeling campaigns and sub-brands and stuff. So this has basically been what I've been wrestling with for the last 12-ish years. It's basically like some unique flavor with each and every organization that we've worked with. And so as a result, we've landed on a few, sturdy concepts and solutions that we found to be really helpful at addressing this diversity without necessarily saying like you need, everything stuffed into one design system, or design systems are a terrible idea and you should abandon them altogether, right? It's really about kind of how do you in your organization kind of cook in the right level of consistency and shared infrastructure where it makes sense, while also providing and cooking in the right levels of flexibility and agency and autonomy, so that it's not this either or situation, and rather this both and situation.
Yeah, and this episode got me thinking about just how important context is to systems work. And I think we even hinted at this in the conversation this week, was like somebody was saying, like, the way you approach systems, it's so different in every org. And it's because there's a different mix of these kinds of dimensions of diversity, but there's also different people with different skill sets. There's different cultures, different ways of working, ways of decision making, different incentives. All of these things are huge factors in how you approach systems work if you want what you do to be sustainable. And systems only show value over time, right? So we need them to be sustainable if we're going to invest in them. So this was a really engaging conversation. You can see the data we gathered here in the FigJam. We also asked folks this idea of like, just to kind of get a sense for how people were feeling, right? So we said, hey, on a scale from failure over on the left side to success on the far right, how would you describe your attempts to address that organizational diversity? And you can see there's a fairly standard distribution chart here, but a lot of folks feeling just barely on the side of success here, And I do think it's a hard space to be in, We actually did a session a couple of seasons back with Guy that was about the emotional labor of design system work. And this, I think, helps express that too in some ways. It's like, it's a lot of work. It's hard. You're trying to deal with so many moving pieces and parts. And, I think you said something nice, Brad. I'll just ask you to repeat this. You mentioned this in the call about the sort of extreme ends. Would you just sort of like reiterate that to folks who are listening to this recap?
Yeah, I think what's represented here is actually pretty healthy. It's like it skews on the positive, so there's hope baked into that little bell curve, right? It's not totally like square in the middle. There's always room for improvement, right? So I get really, really skeptical whenever it's like, we're great, 100% successful. There's this kind of like cockiness and we've encountered it a fair amount in our work, where you start working with the team and you have some people who are expressing that. And of course, that kind of cuts you off from, learning and growing and improving, right, and stuff. And people undoubtedly get invested in, the hard work that they've done, and they want that work to be valued. But that could translate to sort of a defensiveness. So I think it's quite healthy to not be like, oh yeah, we're totally killing it and this is amazing. But then also the other extreme of like, oh, we're a total failure. I think that this is another thing that I encounter in a lot of organizations that I've worked with, is them going, yeah, we're doing nothing right and whatever. And then you start getting into it, and of course they're doing plenty of things right, and they're, getting the ball rolling for a lot of things, or things might be incomplete, or they might be whatever. And so I see that total failure attitude as being unhealthy, because, be kinder to yourself and allow yourself to understand that this is hard work. Like Guy is saying, it's like, this is hard work. Even if you haven't produced anything materially, like just even probably just say the handful of meetings that you've had to kind of get the ball moving forward, that's not a total failure, right? It just means that you have more work to do. So I like this kind of like gently sloping bell curve that skews on the end of success, but also I view that as hope.
Yeah, I love that. Such a positive perspective on it. Yeah, thanks for that. So if you missed the call, the deep dive, this Fig Jam is loaded with a bunch of information. So we pulled some interesting quotes from folks who answered. The second question that we asked you all was, how are you addressing the complexity that you see in your org? And so these three sections here in the center are just a handful of sort of representative quotes that we pulled from those open text answers. And so there's a lot of interesting things here, and some of the folks from the actual deep dive have left comments and advice and interesting notes about some of these. So take a peek at these. You can also dive into the raw data yourself. Every week when we do this, we release, as you can see, we sent this to about 900 folks. We've got about 100 answers, and you can go look at that raw data here. We did link out to Brad's article, the All the Things org, and that is linked to the very first resource down here. So if you haven't read that article, check that out on Brad's blog. We spent a lot of time talking about just like, what do we do? What do we do about this? And so we got into some conversation around tokens, and you gave us a nice sort of explanation here. And I think your point here, if I was going to try to summarize this, was like, we need to have a strong separation of concerns. We need to recognize that the colors of a thing shouldn't necessarily impact its functionality, right? The sort of layer, the visual layer, is separate from the functional layer. And that's what we're trying to do with systems, is sort of tease those things apart in some ways. And I loved that analogy with the door. Then we kind of got into the concept of recipes. Brad, I'd love to have you just give us like a 60-second primer on recipes, because I think there's a lot of people interested in that right now, and a lot of confusion about where it lives, who owns it, and when it's needed.
Yeah. Recipes has definitely been one of the most potent solutions to a lot of the issues that we've encountered with design systems, which is, hey, design system doesn't have this, the design system sucks. There's this inherent tension, right, between product teams and design systems. And that's important to recognize that tension. That's not anybody's doing anything wrong. There's nobody to win or lose in this, but it does sort of pick at this, well, there should be some things that are shared, and these common universal solutions to common problems that people encounter should be baked into a core design system. And those things should be really encouraged and incentivized across the organization. Hey, don't build checkbox or date picker or whatever for the millionth time. Like, we have that. That's not a good use of your time. That's not the sort of product specific work. At the same time, you all need to create great products, and the design system is not going to provide all of the answers or all of the UI solutions to everything that you need to create in your product. So that's what this recipe layer is it's basically this layer that sits on top of the core design system that's owned by the product teams, right? But it's where they're able to assemble compositions of core design system components as well as create their own components. And often it's a combination of the two where, oh, here's this thing that's using 4 design system components, but then we also need this super funky badge that looks like a starburst or whatever. And that's the place for that work to happen. And so what that allows for, the introduction of this recipe layer, is for product teams to have the agency and autonomy and the flexibility to create what they need to create and to use that stuff consistently within their own product, right? And also make use of the core design system, right? So you're sort of like creating this ladder or this spectrum where it's not this, oh, the design system doesn't have what I need, therefore we need to abandon it altogether. It just means, the design system doesn't have what we need, and here's the place where we could go ahead and create that thing that we need.
Yeah.
So, and that opens the door, and we had a good conversation about this in the call, is that like this recipe layer becomes this kind of X-ray vision for what's happening across the organization, and that the core design system team can then sort of assume the role of kind of curator and collector of these different ideas, and to do the hard work that's, grounded in, conversation and research and figuring out, oh, here's 4 different solutions for the same thing happening at this recipe layer. That's a good signal that might be like a problem we're solving and putting in the core design system.
Yeah.
And it's going to take more time than it's going to take each of those individual teams to crank out a solution that meets their own needs.
So from a very tactical standpoint, Brad, the recipe layer, being put in place to sort of address some of the complexities that we've been asking about in this episode, is that, in your experience, a single Figma file? Is there an associated repository? Like, how is it created in a way that it gives you sort of a single place to see the commonality between what product teams are doing with lower level system pieces and parts?
Yeah, I guess you technically could do that, and I think that Jenny was sort of describing that. Jenny Yip was describing that they're like kind of, here's the place. In our experience, it tends to be, I'd say that the overwhelming majority of the organizations we've worked with have a lot of decentralization, which is to say that each individual sort of product silo or business unit or whatever differentiating factor, they all kind of have their own things going on. And so it doesn't necessarily need to be this like sort of single place where everyone is kind of like looking at that. It's a good idea and great if you could swing it, or maybe the design system team like kind of curates a resource out to those other things. So there's a lot of ways to kind of like glue them together, but it's also, again, it's like the product teams need to be focused on making their great product, and it'd be great if they like are about to get into something. It's like, oh, what have other people done? Like, that'd be great to have as a resource. But it's also, in our experience, it's just like they're the kind of, they're in the weeds, they've got the horse blinder on, they need to ship something in like the next 2 weeks. Yeah. So they're not necessarily thinking about the big picture. And that's, again, that sort of inherent tension between the design system layer and the product layer. So it's really like the role of the design system team to kind of help like sort of, guide people to different things, but also when it comes to doing the work, it's kind of pulling that stuff down, if it makes sense.
Yeah, I love that.
But you're also just like quite, And we had a good conversation about this on the call, where it's like the design system team can help architect this layer cake, right? Like this ecosystem, but they're not owning the guts of it, right? So they could kind of participate in its creation. They could help everyone understand, here's this Figma file, or here's this code base, or maybe it's even your product code base or whatever. Here's how you should be thinking about this, right? Here's how you can participate in this. Here's the relationship between the core design system and this layer. And that could be as far as it goes, right? And then kind of from there, they're off to the races. And if they have questions, comments, concerns, or if they're creating a bunch of stuff, that becomes an opportunity for the design system team to basically peek into their world. And if they're doing some things that are like maybe not so great or whatever, then they can kind of proactively reach out and kind of be like, oh, looks like you're doing some interesting stuff. Like, let's talk about it, and maybe like, just nudge them back into line, right? So it's this really healthy middle ground, I think, that like balances utilizing the system and the parts of the system that are available to use. And that, again, that should be like a slam dunk and should be, widely trusted and gets you all of this good stuff for free, but still provides that agency and that flexibility and that ability for them to own their own destiny.
Yeah. These two techniques of a strong sort of token architecture and a recipe layer that lives just outside the core system, when they're combined, I can see how they would address a lot of these challenges, because we're acknowledging that there are some codified design decisions that we want to encourage every part of the organization to stay true to. That's captured in the design tokens. And then we acknowledge that there's a need to sort of give product teams a bit more flexibility maybe than system teams have traditionally been doing. And that is where a way that we could say, hey, use the smaller pieces and parts to compose your own things, but just try to follow the patterns we've established with the system. And then we're sort of in some ways almost like we're giving them trust, like we're trusting these product teams to do the things they need to do. And do you feel like as an industry, you've seen that shift of like, I don't know if you would say this, but like early in his design system sort of like history, we were holding a little too tightly, trying to be too constraining, and now recipes is a way to sort of relax that grip a little bit. Is that how you see it, or what, or how do you see it, if not?
Yeah, I think that's probably an assessment, and I think that sort of holding things tightly was never a good idea,
right.
And I think often just misses the point of what these things are meant to do. Even in the early days, it's like I think people's interpretation of this stuff as, oh, here is this, gospel that you can't deviate from, or else you'll be, damned. It's like that's never been healthy, and I don't think that's ever been true, but that's how it's been interpreted. And I think that some systems people, for sure, want to exert that control, and they have, the blueprint in their head of the perfect world. And unfortunately, it's a bit of a cold shower to recognize that the world isn't perfect, or that making things happen, especially whenever you're talking about such like a vast and varied digital landscape, that there needs to be some give and take, and there needs to be some of that flexibility cooked in. And that's why I like to sort of pick at that combination of the tokens plus the recipes as a really interesting thing. In the course, we talk about how design tokens can be delivered by way of the actual design system components, right? By this component library. So you just plug in the button and you get the styling and the tokens that kind of come along for the ride, which is awesome. And that's the kind of like the ideal, or like the most integrated solution, right? People aren't even messing with tokens. All they're doing is pulling in, oh, I need some form fields, I need some buttons, I need this navigation stepper controller, whatever. And they just got to get that stuff for free. Yeah. And that's extremely helpful. But the cool thing is that many places are not in a position to consume those components, to use them directly. Maybe it's a third-party thing. Maybe they have their own existing, Angular, React, or whatever, like library, and they're not going to actually ingest what's kind of in the core design system. But the cool thing is that these tokens are also able to be ingested as a standalone thing. So you could kind of, and none of these things are mutually exclusive. So teams can be creating their own custom recipes. They could be creating that sort of Starburst badge or whatever,
Yeah.
but they could still wire that up to the token system and basically say, oh, this is wired up to background brand, and that Starburst badge is going to render the appropriate brand thing. So you're kind of like providing a number of different ways to adopt a design system and to engage with it, in that it's not this binary. It's not this, here's this stuff, and are you using the components, yes or no. You're able to sort of be like, well, here's like a few different ways. Here's a spectrum of ways that you can interact with it, and that all of those things along that spectrum are valid and can serve as these like kind of healthy dipping your toes into the water. If you can't go the whole way right away, maybe you can wire up a couple tokens, and that like gets your foot in the door, and then maybe over time, it kind of, you can kind of iterate your way to further adoption.
Yeah, I love that. That's something we covered in another episode with Davey on the concept of micro adoption, right? Like, what's the lowest level of adoption we can support? And
Beautiful.
We had a great conversation, because it's not even like there's stuff even lower than tokens. Like, I could, if I just follow your guidelines, that's a form of adoption, right? And it's, I think we have to get away from that sort of like judgment on product teams or consuming teams who aren't adopting in sort of the most ideal way. I'm a fan of seeing it kind of like you described, of like, there's a roadmap to adopt, right? And you can start really small, and it's very easy, and you can work your way up towards more robust adoption. And in that way, it's not enough to just measure numbers of like who's adopted and who's not. It's not binary, it is much more nuanced than that. And so the health of the adoption may be something, or the sort of level of adoption of a team or a product. So there's a lot more to unpack there, but this is great. Anything else that stuck out to you from the conversation, Brad, that you want to call out?
I really liked what Jenny and Jesse Gardner were saying, just I think really about when it comes to these things, even for design systems people, right? There's a lot of these misconceptions, or it takes a lot to just kind of go, oh, okay, like here's this new science, or, oh, we're doing this more sort of separation of concerns, design token system and component system. Like, that takes a lot, just even for the people constructing, who are really intimate with these systems, to get familiar with. And then, oh, here's this other thing, this idea of recipes, and there's all of that. There tends to be a lot of just assumptions that it's like, oh, well, we'll do these things, and then everyone will just kind of automatically know how to wield them and how to use them successfully. And I think that Jenny and Jesse, I think we're really kind of picking at this, but I feel like really everyone that weighed in, I think they're sort of getting at the cultural element and the education aspect, the importance of really driving the narrative home, but helping sort of people understand here's what's going on here, but also like understand, your own understanding of here's what you're wrestling with, and to be able to contextualize what it is you're trying to guide them towards through their reality. So you can go, oh, okay, like here's what you're trying to get done, and how this is frustrating. Well, here's this concept that we found to be really helpful, and we'd love to collaborate with you on that. So it's like that kind of the more sort of human aspects of that. And that's just like something that we've just seen time and time again, where people they'll create the systems, they'll create the assets, they'll do the tokens, and then they're like, oh, nobody's using them. And it really does just require that real human connection and collaboration, and just like really leaning into like to their worlds, right? The people you're trying to serve, like you just have to get closer to them.
Yeah.
And you need to like really come at it from this place of genuine trying to understand what you're up to. We feel confident that we have stuff that can help you, and
Yeah.
we're eager to, you know, collaborate with you, learn more from you, and we hope that you learn some things from us, and that we have these kind of structures and these concepts and stuff that can really help this balancing act of giving you the tools and the agency that you need to do your thing, while also, you know, building on these sort of solid shared foundations.
Yeah. Brad, you're reminding me of a conversation that I had actually in Pittsburgh at Symmetry last year, the event that we ran together. And I was sitting there and I was talking with Dan Denny. You know Dan.
Oh, yeah.
And we were talking about this sort of challenge that a lot of what we talked about today was how to like give enough flexibility to the product teams. We were talking about that, and the idea that system teams need to change their posture a little bit. And I think what we covered in this session was very practical techniques for how to change your posture. But at that time, I don't know that we had that language yet. And we were talking about it, and somebody used the phrase, "I don't want the system to feel like the police." And,
Yeah.
you know, like we're constantly out policing, saying no to things, or like telling people they're breaking the law or whatever. And Dan had this really interesting observation, and he said, I know he recognized that in the United States, especially, we've had a lot of challenges with policing in communities, but he also called out that there are models of policing that are very healthy. In those models, a police officer lives in the community that they protect, and they know those people, and they build relationships with them, and they have trust. And in the moment where they have a need, there's trust instantly. And it just reminds me so much of what you're saying, Brad, where it's like we have to do the work before there's a challenge, before there's an emergency, before there's a need. So we have those relationships with the consuming teams. We need to have that model, you know, and that trust, that relationship is what will enable us to then have really healthy conversations when things get hard, when somebody needs to break the rules in a very reasonable way. And we've already got the relationship, you know. So I like that as a model. It's an interesting parallel.
Yeah, I think that really with anything, it all boils down to that in your relationships and your connection to people, or lack thereof. And it's just always so funny across literally any aspect of this work, but even beyond, right? It is, people instinctively are like, oh, like what's the tool, what's the thing, what's the automation, what's the whatever that can ultimately kind of get at this. And it has everything to do with this very intangible, ineffable quality that really comes down to human beings connecting with one another. And so it's my instinct on literally any issue, whether we're talking political divide, climate change, any sort of gnarly topic, all the way through design tokens and design system work. It's because what happens when I love that parallel to actual policing, but it's like when you have that trust established, or when you know that if I have a problem, I know that I could ask this person a question and they're not going to be mad.
Yeah.
Like you could solve any problem. You could literally solve any problem. You can stamp out any confusion, and you can sort of jam on something together. And it's really broadcasting that willingness to say like, hey, we're good people. We're here to help, and come to us with anything. That allows you, that opens the door for real collaboration, real connection, because the systems people certainly don't have all the answers. They don't have all the context, right? The product people don't understand what these systems are meant to do. So it's really, it requires that coming together to actually figure it all out. Yeah. And people like to pretend that there isn't time for that. And I think that's the real issue, is that we do so much work to convince ourselves that there just isn't enough time to kind of do that human work. Or, you know, it's always easier. I was just having this conversation yesterday. It's always easier to just respond to the Jira ticket or reassign the thing to that person.
Yeah.
Or the step up from that is to, you know, get on to Teams or Slack or whatever and sort of like ping them there. It's like, it's harder work
Yeah.
to join a call face to face, or even harder to get up off your butt if you are working in an actual office and go and seek them out, right? That's the actual work of this stuff. And it's a very weird, these are weird conversations to have with people who think that their jobs are to, create rectangles.
Make more components. Yeah.
It's like your job is actually to get over your own social awkwardness and to get out there and to sort of like learn and be curious about what other people are up to.
That's
and they're
it.
like, wait a minute.
Yeah.
And then you model it for them and you show them that it can actually be a hell of a lot of fun. And
Right.
it's just a way better way of being and working and living, that you're like, oh, okay. And once you develop those muscles and you get better at them, it really does fundamentally change how your day-to-day lived experience is.
Yeah. I love that. A lot of power in this stuff. Brad, so two things to wrap up with. One, I'm super excited that Redwoods is open. I've been thinking and dreaming about this for a long time.
Beautiful.
And we finally have that happening. It's amazing. We've got a lot of incredibly brilliant people in this space, interacting on a daily basis. We do weekly calls. We have like deep conversation. We have some action groups going. There's writing accountability. There's just a lot of fun things going on. So
Nice.
if that sounds like something of interest to anybody who's listening to this, please just check it out. And also, you gave the Redwoods community a discount to the course that you and Ian have put together called Subatomic. I'll drop that link in the description here so people can get to it. But give us like a 30 seconds on like what should we expect if we go take this course.
Yeah. 13 and a half hours of video.
Okay.
For one. So core concepts, literal step-by-step guidelines on how to create the stuff from the ground up, an hour and a half on naming conventions,
Love
adoption, maintenance, every advanced use case and stuff like that. The cool thing about a video course is that you can, if something isn't as relevant to you, you can skip right over it or listen to it at 2x. But then we also have, we basically took our enterprise grade design token architecture that we've helped work with all of these different, often Fortune 500 type companies, and we kind of distilled that into a Figma architecture and a code architecture to just like really give like a solid head start, because we see so many teams just kind of like flailing and struggling to kind of get these things off the ground, and certainly to do it in a cross-disciplinary way. So we basically have like a Figma and code architecture that is like perfectly synchronized and like right there ready to go and modify and sort of like tune to your own needs. Or if you just want to like reference it, that's fine. We've also, I think, kind of inadvertently been creating our own community of design token nerds in our Slack channel and stuff. So
Nice.
Me and my brother are hanging out there most of the day and stuff too. And then, like in addition to that, we have like a bunch of the stuff around like the human side of this, like sort of like the governance workflows and stuff. So we have like fig jams and very detailed sort of guidelines to, again, sort of help accelerate the creation and ongoing sort of governance and evolution of these things. So it's kind of all bundled up there as like the education, as well as a lot of like the tools and the resources on how to actually do this stuff.
I love that. And just so you know, if you're listening, like this is not a sponsorship of any kind, right? Like Brad and I have just known each other for a long time. I know he's really good at this work, he and Ian both. And so like just a chance to sort of like help other folks in the community discover really good resources like this course, I think that's just what I want to be about. So no exchange of goods has occurred here. We're just trying to like help spread the word.
Exchange of vibes. That's
there you
how
go.
we operate.
That's what it is. Love it. Brad, as always, buddy, I really appreciate your attitude, your willingness to spend so much of your time and energy helping the community grow. So thank you for being on The Question this week. I appreciate your time.
Yeah, thank you for having me. As always, keep doing the thing. I'm so excited to see all of this stuff blossom. So
yes.
Keep it up.
All right, buddy. We'll talk to you soon. And goodbye, everybody.
Right.
Thanks for listening.